Good evening, everybody. Good evening, good evening, good evening. So happy that you are all able to join us. I am Dr. Anthony Street. I'm the CEO of the National Association of Social Workers, and I am so excited to welcome you to this tonight's conversation, Healing While Black, Reimagining Mental Health for Black Men and Boys. This is our third iteration of this conversation. We did one at the National Conference for NASW, and we did another one at Black Health Connect. So this is our third iteration of this conversation, which really speaks to the ongoing need of this conversation to really think about the mental health of Black men and boys, and really how can we all engage in better conversations, better community, and better care of our Black men and boys. I'm going to introduce you to our speakers, or actually they're going to introduce you to themselves, but I just kind of wanted to lay the framework of this kind of conversation and why it's so important. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with the introductions, and really how we've typically done this is our speakers will introduce themselves, and we'll start off with a easy question to get things going. And so tonight we're going to start off with what does healing while Black mean to you? And we'll start with you, Paul.
What's going on, y'all? I am Paul Bashe Williams, licensed clinical social worker and psychotherapist, author of Dear Future Wife, A Man's Guide, and A Woman's Reference to Healthy Relationships. Also, the Found Journal is self-discovery for Black men. It's about 121 questions that we need to ask ourselves, to find ourselves, to understand ourselves, to show up better. I also have a father's journal because I'm a father. And when I help fathers try to figure out how they're showing up as fathers, because a lot of times maybe our father wasn't in the house, or we didn't have the best relationship, or we didn't get the best tools. And sometimes we're doing a great job, but we don't recognize that we are. So this is kind of like affirming ourselves. But that's also a journal that my son and I created together. So healing to me, and what that looks like to me or reimagining healing is it's a constant process, right? It's a constant check-in. It's constant affirming what's happening with us. Healing to me feels like challenging some of the stereotypes and some of these previous experiences. And healing to me looks like grace, because I think we don't give ourselves enough grace in our process of healing, because we feel like we're always we're going to reach a point where we're totally healed, but that's not the truth.
No, thank you. And I want to welcome Aaron. So we'll go ahead and jump to Dr. Frame to hear more about you and what does healing while Black mean to you?
Good evening, everyone. So excited to be here with you this evening. Dr. Brandon Frame, founder of The Black Man Can, professor of social emotional learning at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut, author of Defining Yourself, Redefining the World, a guided journal for boys and men of color, my first Thai children's book. And when I think about healing while Black, what that means to me is a few things. One, I want to echo Bashe around the first that it's a process, that healing is a process. And then additionally, it's realizing that I don't have to suffer in silence, that I don't have to be on an island by myself, and that I can pull together and meet with brothers and create spaces for us so that we're not on an island by ourselves and that we're not suffering in silence. And so that's what it looks like to me. And lastly, I would add to that is that it looks like embracing as you move forward in life, embracing that you move from surviving to thriving. I can think of growing up and thinking about like you're just on survival mode, but you've taken steps and you've made decisions that allow for you to move into this space of thriving for yourself and your family, and embracing that.
No, thank you for sharing. And then we're gonna come over to Aaron.
Yes. Good evening, everybody. Aaron Muller here. So when I think about healing while Black, it means carrying that dual burden of processing your own trauma and still having to navigate these systems that kind of oppress us. And it wasn't designed for us to be well, right? Learning that to trust therapy and the vulnerability of that, despite some of the challenges that therapy, in terms of the mistrust, right, Tuskegee experiment, things of that, right? And we're taught that emotional expression is a dangerous thing, right? We're hearing the word sassy and all of that stuff. So despite all of that, still pushing through and persevering and kind of finding your own individuality. So that's what's healing while Black.
No, thank you for sharing. I think, as we're talking about this, for me, Healing While Black means that, we're finding community like this, right? We are boldly talking about things that impact our community, especially Black men and boys. We are really engaging and walking that path of healing. So not only speaking about it on platforms like this, but actually engaging in it, really creating community with brothers like you all, but also, really thinking about what does it look like to be a father, uncle, son, all the different things, and showing up as the best version of you. I think far too often, the idea of masculinity is that we have to suffer in silence, right? And so when we talk about healing while Black, it's breaking those stereotypes. It's really allowing us the space to show up as who we are unapologetically, whether I am, Anthony, out in the community, or Dr. Street in the office. It's being who I am 100% of the times, and being okay with that, being vulnerable with being okay with that. And so one of the things that is always so interesting, and I love having this conversation with you guys, is because when we think about like our trajectory into this space, like we all had a very different start into this space of talking about health and wellness for Black men and boys, and what kind of triggered our commitment. For me, I've always had a care and concern for the Black community, but when we started really focusing on Black men and boys is when I started working in this space in a substance use treatment center, and in true form and fashion. After I graduated with my MSW, I got a job, and what do you think happened? I got all the Black men, and I mean all the Black boys that were on their caseload. They all got shifted to me because I was going to somehow fix all of their problems because we were all Black, and that I had all the answers, right? An interesting experience, but also a humbling experience, because you also understand that you show up in this space that requires you to not only be a space and a vessel for people to share their experiences, but also to give guidance. And so I want to come back to you, Aaron. Like, what was the moment for you where you found commitment in this work to Black men and boys?
So I'll talk about this story a lot. Is defining moment. I would say it was two. One was when I started working in addiction. I started working at a methadone program, and this was before I started the MSW program. And like you, I was assigned a lot of, and I had older adults, but they assigned me a lot of the men because it wasn't many substance abuse counselors that was working at this facility. And then fast forward when I started the MSW program, and I saw there wasn't really a lot of Black men in the program. And I was like, wow, that's very significant. I know social work, it's generally not a lot of men in there. So that's something that I saw. I said, wow, I think the impact is going to be great in terms of doing this work and why it's so important. So that was kind of a pivotal moment. And then just throughout my career, just being in different spaces, being in the school setting, you see that there's not really many men in the school building as well, depending on the school, and how impact it is seeing someone that looks like you. And this research, as I'm navigating this very challenging doctoral program, about how relatability is so important for Black men, and seeing someone that looks like them when they are being treated at any facility, whether it be physically or mentally, and how vital it is to have us in those spaces. So I think that's really what kind of stood out for me, and what continues to drive me to do this work.
And what about you, Brandon? What was it that drove your commitment to this work?
It's like there's so many different factors and points, but what really resonates for me when I think about this question is going to Morehouse College. And while at Morehouse, I'm meeting all my fellow brothers from all across the world, and hearing their dreams and their goals, but simultaneously working with young boys in the east side of Atlanta. And one of the quotes that I live by is, once you make an observation, you have an obligation. And by hearing my brother's stories, but also working with the young boys in Atlanta, this was around like 2006, 2007, I realized that Black men need to see positive image of themselves and have their stories told. And so therefore I made that observation. So therefore I had an obligation to create something to do that. And so while I was in school, started a mentoring program, and then that ultimately led into the creation of the Black Man Can in 2010. And so since then, we have been actively promoting a positive Black male image and creating programming and partnering with other phenomenal brothers across the country to ensure that we can meet the needs of our young men. And then, as well as, because I started in 2010 and I was like 22 then, and I think about now at 37, and you think about the growth that I've made and what my friends have experienced as they've grown. So now the Black Man Can also covers all the various areas when we start talking about fatherhood and we start talking about mental health. At 22, that's not what we were necessarily thinking of. That's not necessarily what we're thinking about, but that's what we've grown into, because again, once you make an observation, you have an obligation.
Thank you. And Paul?
Yeah, so I have a couple of touch points as well. I think the first one, growing up in low income communities, aka the hood, we've always had some type of resources there. And I remember specifically when we left the Bronx, we moved to Virginia, then we moved to Maryland. And my mother was a property manager, and it required us to live there. And she brought in social workers. And because I was a property manager's son, I was already kind of isolated from the group in a sense, because I'm new there. I'm also from New York. This is Maryland. So there's also that Maryland versus New York type of thing. But I used to sit in the back of this boys group with my hood on, just avoiding everything. And the social worker used to always call me to the front to help facilitate. Although I hated it, it also provided me a way of leadership and connection. And I realized, and we all realize, we're going through the same things in our neighborhood. But one of the things the social worker told me was, and he was white, he told me that I can't reach your community the way that you can. So this is a charge to you to come back and help your community. So that put a lot on my shoulders. And during that time, the only way of getting out the hood was music, basketball, or being lucky, right? It wasn't anything that was really, that stood out that we can really make a difference and just get out of the environments that we lived in. Once I went to school, I took a class in social work, and then I looked at the salaries in social work, and I said, I'm not going to do social work. So that was my misconception, right? We have this misconception of what that looks like and what success looks like, and social workers make money. So I decided to switch my major. But then that summer, my freshman year, summer of my freshman year, I got a job at a therapeutic camp, first working at it as an admin. And then by the end of the camp, I was a counselor. So that was another thing that hit and says, okay, this is what you need to do. But the final thing was, I did play basketball, and I was on my way to go meet the coach for the first time. I had a scholarship, and I had an anxiety attack. And I was like, I don't want to play basketball anymore, period. Right? It didn't matter how good I was. It didn't matter what my chances were, what it would lead to. And I gave up on basketball, but it was anxiety, but it started to shift in other places in my life. And so I had to investigate that. And that kind of got me into understanding what mental illness and mental health looks like in the Black community. And I was like, I need to be able to bring that in back my Black community, because I've seen so many people suffer from depression, anxiety, and other disorders that we don't really know have the language, or we don't really have the resources to address them. So it's like, I need to get back into the community.
No, and I think, one, thank you for your vulnerability. I think that I think people shy away from talking about their experience, especially when it comes to experiencing their own mental health challenges. I think that, one, we have to create more conversations about that, because I think once we start to be more vulnerable, other people start to be vulnerable and talk about that. And so I think the next place I want to go to this conversation is really about, like, what are some of the burdens that are passed down, right? So, as we think about everybody growing up, right, and we've all had experiences, what happens in this house stays in this house, right? So what are the things that are passed down that show up today in terms of Black men and boys?
I mean, I'll jump in. I kind of mentioned it a little earlier, but I think the thing that is definitely passed down is the idea that you don't talk about your feelings, that your emotions don't create space for Black men and boys to be human. That is a big thing that has been passed down, and then we're also treated that way by others. And so we really have to think about or today we're going to talk about how we're all ensuring that we see Black men and boys as human and allow them to show the full range of emotion, so the full range of masculinity. I can remember growing up and hearing boys will be boys, boys don't cry, all these different things that will be said to us as young men. And you think about how that manifests while you're younger, but then also as you become an adult and then the type of man that you are with your friends, your family, and in your community, when we know that we need to be emotionally transparent, that there are aspects of vulnerability that we have to show, but it was not necessarily cultivated in us growing up, and that's been passed down. And we have to continue to eradicate that type of thinking. I think that we're seeing gradual progression across the landscape of men doing this and creating those communities in those spaces, but that is what has been passed down as a burden.
Yeah, I want to add, pass down that emotional suppression, right? We pass that kind of down, that you shouldn't express yourself, and that it could be dangerous if you do, right? That the Black boy becoming the man of the house, so that you becoming adultified before you even allowed to be a child, and what does that look like? And also passing down hypervigilance, which passes down to anxiety, right? So you seeing how your dad is hyper aware, and you have to be aware, always watch your surroundings. And what does that do to your body physically and mentally, constantly having to be on? And there's moments where you don't even know how to kind of be off, right? So a lot of unhealthy patterns and behaviors have been passed down. And part of it has been for survival, right? So I talk about a lot that, some of these emotions and feelings you have to have, if you don't, then you are liable to be prey, right? So recognizing that from a cultural adaptive lens, that acknowledging, I feel you, that you had to be that way, you have to be strong, but also recognizing that there are moments where you can, as Dr. Frame said, where you can kind of turn it off a little bit and find a level of safety. But a lot of burdens have been passed down.
Yeah, I think the other part of it too is that healing is not for us, in a sense, right? Therapy is for white people, right? Therapy means you're crazy. Addressing the things that you've been through is a sign of weakness. It's like we're supposed to carry these scars as awards, as medals, right? You got to get your war wounds. You got to go through these things. You're not supposed to address them. I think we've been told so many different things that's been detrimental to our healing, is that we make fun of people who are smiling online. Like seeing a man smile online and being happy is something soft, right? It's something soft about him, right? We're always supposed to be tough. We're always supposed to be accomplishing. I think a lot of us are told if we're not accomplishing anything at the particular moment, then we're not worth anything. So we're constantly trying to outwork the last thing that we've done, and rest is a punishment. So if I'm resting, that means I have to do something else to show that I'm worthy of where I'm at.
And so I agree with all that. And it's interesting as we're having this conversation and really thinking about, the burdens that are passed down. I think it's also, and you're all kind of touching on it. It's really around, how do we show emotion, right? And so just given the current state of the political environment, all the things that are going on, I've had conversations. I've certainly engaged with Black men and boys that are experiencing a lot of different feelings. And so, one of the questions that we often don't talk about is, what does the expression of really strength look like? How can we expand that, right? Because sometimes this definition of strength is the strong silent type, right? We're not going to say anything about our feelings. So how do we expand the definition of strength while also including the expansion of emotional expression?
I mean, you got it, Aaron.
Now, I tell you, I constantly redefining what that means, right? So I think naming, celebrating a black man that goes to therapy, like that's tremendous strength to me. Being able to admit that you're struggling. You know what I'm saying? My students in my school, I tell them I'm in a doctoral program and that I lost my paper after it was 11 pages, and I told them I cried myself to sleep. That's like, for real, Mr. Mudd. Like, I acknowledge that. You know what I'm saying? I let them know whatever emotion that I'm feeling, if I'm anxious. So really giving name to emotion and also being a model. I think that's the first step in terms of redefining what strength is. And it's not about enduring how much pain you can endure, right? It's having the courage to name it. So I think that's the biggest thing about just constantly redefining what strength look like, and working through it. So I tell my clients, my black male clients that I work with, that it's important to celebrate you going through to therapy, celebrating every emotion that you're going through, and not being fearful of acknowledging if you're crying, if you're sad, if you're feeling down. So I think part of that is being vulnerable and sharing it.
Yeah, I think what I'm really big on and constantly talking about is have to get we have to create as many spaces, opportunities for black men to and boys to get together as a gender, right? I think about our programming. All our programming is pretty much done that way, where we have I think about our summer camp in Dallas, Texas, that we had, where it's just black boys. All the counselors are black men. The program we have currently here in New York City, where we have boys who are all high school graduates preparing to college, and the time that they get to spend together. And what happens in these spaces is we get to talk about emotions, but the language to talk about emotions is built, and it's built amongst each other, and it's built with professionals who can help those boys work through what they're thinking, but to apply the language, which then in the spaces we get to talk about these emotions and put and acquire the language, and then they're able to go out and use that language with their partners, with their parents, in the community. And that's when you start to see, like, oh wow, listen to this man talk, right? And when you're able to have command of that language, to be able to fully express your emotions, to be able to talk about what's wrong, right? You can do that. But also, even in that space, when you put them together, you start to get to the space of you can ask for help, right? But that's encompassed about getting men together, creating those spaces, and then you start to see, because then that also leads to, now I'm not on an island by myself. I do not have to suffer in silence, because we're creating those spaces. So every school should have a boys program. Different community centers need to have something where we're just bringing the boys together, right? And then even that starts to lend itself as we start talking about sports, right? And thinking about, like, I think about growing up, and maybe some of you and people listening can relate to, like, when I think about some of the language that I learned around being able to talk about how I felt came from playing sports, right? So then what happens when we're also thinking about how do we even use football and basketball, baseball, and so on as spaces to fully develop the social emotional skills? Because a lot of us, that's actually where we learned social emotional development, it was on the field or on the court. And so what happens when we're able to make sure that is explicit and intentional there, is happening explicitly intentional in our schools, and now we're growing young boys who will become men who have the language to be able to talk about what their challenges are, be able to ask for help, and create a really great space.
Yeah, I don't have much to add to that. I think you're talking about emotional honesty, right? And really, once you find out what that emotion is, being able to use it and being honest with how you feel, because a lot of times we're not honest. We just aren't honest with how we feel, because if we show that, if we tell somebody that we're struggling, it may not be responded in kind, right? It may not be responded to the way that we need it. And also, we're not given permission. So the more that we investigate what these emotions are, the more we use them correctly. And the more that we use them correctly, the more we have the opportunity to be supported, right? And also interdependence as opposed to isolation. And that's what you guys are talking about, is when we're depending on our community, right? With their strength in numbers. And referencing sports or just working out, what they tell you, when you work out, you break the muscle in order to get it stronger, right? The more you lift, you're ripping the muscles apart, and then it's getting stronger. So that's how it grows. And that's essentially what we have to do. And oftentimes we hear that men want these groups, right? They want to have a place where we can go and just us and talk about our challenges, talk about our needs, and talk about being able to complain right in a right space and being able to get support the way we need to support, or and finding out that somebody else is going through the same thing that we're going through. We're not alone in this fight, alone in this struggle, and being able to lean on that other person. We need that. But the other side of that is when we create it, we have to sustain it. Because sometimes we create these groups but then we fall off because we go back into that same isolated space where I got to take care of me because nobody's going to look out for me. Even if the resource is there, we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable and hold our buddies accountable to healing and to growing.
But I think to that point, and you know, it was one of the comments in there. I think we have to continue to create spaces and spaces where we can be authentic, right? I think that, you know, and we've all talked about this, and when we talk with just the four of us, you know, there's a certain level of rawness that we can get to when it's just us four, right? That we could talk about the success of being a Black man, but also the struggles that we had to endure to get here, right? And so that creates a different level of safety that when you're in, you know, an environment with people that you trust that you can, you know, express what's going on. Like, hey dog, like today, like my anxiety is through the roof. Like it's not working for me today. Right. And I think that creates a sense of vulnerability, but it also gives us permission to really expand on what this looks like from emotional expression, but then to also receive that support, right? Where you also have somebody saying, hey, I've been there before as well. This is what I've done. Or, hey, you know, when I had anxiety, this is what helped me. And you get that reassurance, like, one, I'm not crazy because I'm experiencing anxiety. And two, you know, other people have experienced it, right? And so I think that creating these spaces they have to be intentional, but then they also have to be a space where people feel like they can consistently come to, right? You know, I hear a lot of times in this work, you know, I tried to create a group for Black men and boys and nobody showed up, right? And so it becomes this argument like, oh, we created this thing and nobody showed up, but was it safe? Mm-hmm. Was it consistent? Was it something that you did one time thinking that everybody was going to show up and nobody showed up? Like, how do we show up consistently for Black men and boys in an environment, right? And also understanding that you don't have to be a therapist to impact the lives of Black men and boys. I think that community is what we make it, right? Everybody plays their role, from, you know, the grandma that sits on the porch to people that are in the therapy rooms. I think we all play a role in how we effectuate change and healing among Black men and boys. And so one of the things that I wanted to really talk about, right, and this is probably going to go into a lot of different directions, is how do we hold our communities accountable, right? You know, everybody says, you know, we want to see Black men and boys heal. We want to see, you know, people grow up, but how do we hold people accountable? How do we get people to move past this vision and more into action?
How much time you got?
Hey, we don't got that much time tonight, but we can always do another one. But go ahead, Aaron.
That's a huge thing where we talk about community stigma, and that is one of the biggest things that's holding our brothers back from getting the help that they need. It's that fear of like, man, you going into that therapy or whatever it is that's menacing words, that's distracting them from doing what they need to do. You understand what I'm saying? So I think being mindful about telling somebody just pray about it, that's one aspect of it, but then also listening and hearing. So what's some other things that, how can I support you? You know, Bashe, we have a group chat with another friend of ours, Unica. If we all share something, the first thing is, how can we support you? And I think everyone learning that phrase goes a very long way, right? Is how can I support you? And starting to listen more, right? Because one thing is that everybody can say that, oh, I'm a therapist too. But one thing about we do more listening than we do talking. So that's one thing. People need to be heard. And that's one thing that Black men needs to be heard and listened to without judgment. So checking in on our brothers, being mindful about this sassy things when someone's expressing themselves. That doesn't make you sassy when you're expressing yourself. So I think there's an oxymoron between this work that we're doing and what we're still seeing on social media. So that's one thing. So it's like, express yourself, but then you got a meme about Tyrese when he's crying, expressing himself, or Will Smith. So for me, it's this, like, it's performative and it's fake. It's either we're gonna be with it for real or we not. Right. So I we've come a long way. There's still a lot of work to be done, because the first thing, if a black man express himself, he's gonna be a meme immediately.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no safety in that. So how do we hold community accountable? If somebody making something like, yo, take that down, dog, like that, you whack for that because he's expressing himself. So I think being progressive and acknowledging, like, if we're gonna be moving forward with just mental health for everybody, especially black men, then if we see something that's wild, take that down. Oh, I'm not riding with that. Instead of the laughing and the repost and all of that stuff. So that's the biggest part in terms of why there's still a lot of resistance, because we still see it in real time.
No, I agree, and that contradiction on social media is y'all know, because we talk about this a lot. Like, y'all know I struggle with social media, and that contradiction in social media happens so much where people want to, it's Mental Health Awareness Month, it's Minority Mental Health Month, but at the same time, you have people posting things that criticize and tear down, right? And so it's all about building community. And I really want to go to Brandon real quick, because Brandon, and I've always admired your work, but I'll tell y'all just a quick story. I met Brandon a year ago. Brandon, was it?
Yep.
I met Brandon a year ago at Black Health Connect, and when I tell you, like, he is a solid brother, like, he shows up for everything, and really the thing that I love most about his work is that he shows up for community. And so Brandon just did this summer camp with a group of young boys in Dallas, Texas, and he had a black male violinist coming and doing the whole Kendrick Lamar hip hop. So tell us a little bit about what that experience was like, and what did those young men say?
I mean, so the camp, this particular program, and we like to call it's Building a Better Brother, also known as Black Boy Summer School. So we run summer school programs for Black boys, led by Black men. It is meticulously created for a boy to be everything that realize his potential, be everything he can be, and realize his whole potential. And with that, exposing the boys to men across different careers, different spaces. So we brought in a violinist, and he killed it. Because and so many boys had never met a violinist, let alone a hip hop violinist named Armand Vance. What I want to highlight a story. I have so many stories from the camp, but one story that I wanted to highlight, this also speaks to the last question, and also thinking about the community. One is that there was a boy. And again, we're talking about, they're doing lots of different things from academic stuff to social emotional development. And one boy, when we're talking about social emotional development, this is like an exact thing that happened, because I happened to be in the room when it happened. He goes, I thought I was a bad kid, but I now know that it's just skills that I have to work on. Right. And so here's this Black boy who, because he gets in trouble and he hasn't really had an opportunity to work on his emotions, he thinks he's a bad kid because he's always being it's always punitive in terms of his reality in school, when it's like, no, we just really have to sit with him and have him work on his social emotional skills. And then he learns how to process and manage his emotions. But like, just to see, like, when he did for him to go and then say that, like, it felt like a burden had just been lifted off of his shoulders around. That means he was walking around thinking like, I'm a bad kid. And like, he's not a bad kid, right? He's just got to have the opportunity to work and process his emotions. And so I think about creating so many spaces like that for our boys, and that's what the community needs. And then at the same time, I think another thing that we have to think about is that, as we all know, nobody's coming to save us, right? I'm big on, like, everything that we do, we hire Black men to do these things, right? I believe that we should all volunteer our time to do different things. But when we're talking about Black male achievement, when we're talking about Black men's mental health, and we're talking about these things that we're trying to eradicate, you have to employ Black men to do these things. We can't fully just, you should be giving back. I do think you should give back, but there's also a side of, like, we have to raise money and we have to get funds to employ Black men to do this work, because AI is not going to solve Black male achievement. It's going to come from us working collectively, raising money so that we can actually employ Black men who want to do this work and want to be in the trenches every day. Other men, maybe they can do the volunteerism, but you can also donate. You can do these different things. So I think it's just really important to when we think about the community, is like, how do we look at raising funds so that we can employ Black men to fix the challenges that we have in our communities facing Black men, because we can solve it. We have the knowledge. We have so many Black men who are social workers, therapists, and the list goes on, right? But they also have families, and they do have bills to pay. So we do need to employ them so that they can then do the work that's needed in our communities.
No, I appreciate that. And I think it goes into, again, that conversation around how can we hold our communities accountable, right? But also really, you bring up a very good point. What does it look like when the whole community becomes involved in the healing process? So, Bashe, I want to come to you. Like, if you could imagine what it would look like for the Black community to come together around Black men and boys in healing, what would that look like?
I think we talked about this before, and again, I'm going to reference low-income communities of the hood. We used to have Community Day. It didn't matter what was going on between neighbor A and neighbor D. Community Day, everybody was supporting each other. Everybody was looking out for each other. You would eat somebody's greens that you don't even like, right? They had different activities, the investment, the leaders had responsibility and accountability to lead. Even the people that were mostly ignored, they had a voice. It was specifically targeted for everybody to get along and what they needed to celebrate your particular community. It was the one time where the community came together, and they had specific activities for everybody to really get along and to highlight what they liked. I think that needs to happen. I started mental health in my block, where I would go into different communities and look up different communities, like you said, block parties, bring it in. And we have the Black leaders come in, right? And we partner with the leaders of the community. But again, we also have to give voices to the voiceless in the community, right? We need to be heard. They need to be heard. And we need to come up with a plan to really support each other in those particular communities. And that's what it looks like. We've taken that away. I don't know if they still do Community Day or block parties or anything like that. I haven't heard of it. Maybe it's removed. But also, even when I go back into my old neighborhoods, when I go to give back, it's just not there. The community is there. And I saw something online where they said there's less family reunions because grandma and great grandma passed away. So nobody is taking the mantle to bring the community or bring the families back together to have the family reunion. So that's something else that we need to look into.
Well, I think some of that too is leading with intention, right? And so I think to some of that, like, there's a funding issue, sure, right? So we can get into policy all we want to around funding and what does that look like in Black and brown communities. I think the other part of it is really, what does it look like to be intentional, right? How do we create opportunities for block parties? How do we create opportunities for, days where we are focusing on wellness? And so, when I think about this conversation, I can't help but think about the whole continuum of Black men and boys, right? Not just cisgendered Black men and boys, but the whole continuum across LGBTQ communities and all that, and that we have to show up for each other, right? And that at the end of the day, like, we're all part of the community, and we have to show up and support each other and create these opportunities to feel safe and feel seen. And so, one of the things that I often struggle with, especially in the role that I'm in as CEO, is how do we create situations where social workers and practitioners can get into this vibe of co-creating healing as opposed to prescribing it, right? So if you're a clinician, you know that the first thing we need is a diagnosis, and we have to do the assessment in that whole process. But what would it look like to co-create healing in a community instead of prescribing it?
Well, first thing is meeting people where they are, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the duality that we have to deal with as clinicians, is especially when you come from a trauma-informed lens and you're trying to be culturally responsive. But in order to get paid, you have to meet the needs of the insurance company. So that's this diagnosis, and it only could be particular ones. So how really truly accurate is it if they don't pay for certain ones? But that's a whole nother conversation. But first is meeting people where they are, not where they should be, and understanding that if somebody's resistance, it doesn't necessarily mean defiance. So really reframing these ideas and the ideologies that we have in our trainings about when working with with black men in terms of what is appropriate and what is not, or what we should and shouldn't do, and really meet them where they are and find out what they need. So that's including them in their treatment,
Hmm.
right? That's even from a researcher standpoint. If we there's limited research on black men in intervention, right? Or what's culturally responsive. I'm fourth author on uh, misdiagnosis of and race-based trauma in black men, and we look at the trajectory of a black man that's have been misdiagnosed and how does that impact their life. So now you've a young boy been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and you not necessarily have it, but not understanding the cultural nuances, not understanding the trauma that you experience, how does that impact and shift and change your life, right? So now we need practitioners, nurses, doctors, all to be aware of their own implicit bias. We all have it, but be mindful about that when you're diagnosing and treating a black man, and understanding that I may show up and I may have certain things that may impact my clinical diagnosis and my response. So that's responsibility from an institutional standpoint. And
Hmm.
I think from whether it be government standpoint, it's just like more programming and about for black men, right? Specifically for black men, right? And I would like to see a bill. That's something that I definitely want to aspire to. So I'm gonna put that in. I'm gonna put that in the atmosphere right now. When I finish the doctorate, I want to have a bill around black men's mental health, specifically whether it be around policy, whether it be around funding, whether it be around how you be mindful about being diagnosed, and specific places that they can go to get treated. So I could talk about this all day. So that's the biggest thing. Just recognizing that the relationship with the community is so important. I would love community mental health center. There's so many areas that need a mental health center that funding is going in other people's pockets, is going everywhere, but it's not going where it needs to go. So yeah, I could go all day, but that's what I want to say when I start this, meeting people where they are, meeting these brothers where they are,
Okay.
and getting the help that they need.
No, I appreciate that. Bashe?
I think being honest that I see it's going on in the comments, we have to be honest that these systems don't want us to heal, right? They don't want us to get better to the point where we're not harming each other, right? Because we are legitimately a threat to systems because they were built on them staying in power. So we have to be able to challenge those different systems, and we also have to be the face of the challenge, right? And not be afraid. And when one person steps up, we have to be able to anchor them and support them in their process, right? We have to stand beside them, because so often that when one person steps up, they become that person, but we see them getting taken down and we say, we just give up. Right? And I don't think that's what we need to do. We need to continue to support each other, just like this mission. Something may happen where funding is taken. Like I had a program and funding was taken because it was just too successful, right? Because if I'm keeping the kids out of jail, if I'm keeping the kids out of juvenile, if I'm keeping the kids out of the court system, then where's the funding going? Because the funding is not proactive, it's reactive. But they weren't willing to give the proactive funding because it just wasn't serving them. So I think starting from there is addressing the system and fighting back the best way that we can.
Brandon?
I mean, yeah. When I think about the idea of chasing social justice, I think Bashe just really hit that nail on the head. It's something that we have to address. Like we at the Black Man Can, we also have programs in juvenile facilities. So when we're working with the boys there, one of the conversations we have is like we're kind of like the only people here who like have a concerned interest in you not being here. Everybody else is employed because you're here. This goes back to my point about we have to employ Black men, especially in the proactive space, so that we don't have to spend, because we spend billions on reactive, like police, but the police itself is a reactive measure, right? It's not and created around proactive nature to do the things in our communities that we need, right? And so that comes back to us as a community and thinking about how are we going to, as a community, put money together for proactive things, because the government and the system is designed for everything to be reactive. It's like once you do something wrong, oh, you can get all the resources what happens when we are able to do all the prevention work that is needed. So I think we really need to take that deep dive. I love that Bashe brought that up, because that is a huge issue, right? Police budgets are astronomical, and they're only going up, right? We've seen the ICE budget go out of this world, right? And so they're funding that. That's what people are lobbying for. Even to the policy piece, we need to take dark money out of politics. But that's a different conversation for another day as well. But we need to do that. One of the things to go back that I just wanted to mention too, when I think about the work that we're talking about in terms of reimagining mental health for Black men and boys, and we're hitting on it with so many different topics today. You often hear people say this quote, which is, "It takes a village to raise a child." That's a very prominent quote. But I think the one thing that we don't always talk about as much is like the rest of that proverb, which is, the child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. And that's when I think about the things we see in our community in regards to Black men and boys, is people want to feel the love. Yeah. Black men and boys want to be seen as human, and they want to feel the love. For too long, we haven't. So what we're actually witnessing is Black men and boys, in a way, burn things down because there hasn't been enough love given to them so that they can reach their full potential.
And so I appreciate that. And we're moving into the space now where we'll take questions from the audience. So please type your questions in there, and I'm certainly they'll put them up. But I just want to, again, just show appreciation to all of you brothers on here, because, whenever I still remember when I first sent out the first text message, y'all were like, "We with it," and it's just been going like crazy, right? And really, just creating this space to have these conversations, and we're going to have more conversations about this, because the more we're talking about it, the more we are normalizing it and really creating an opportunity for other people to talk about it. So, one of the things that we often try to do is we create these spaces and these conversations, not just for people to come and listen, but to also for you to take these things back to your community. So one of the things that we want to charge everybody on this call with is that, when you leave, make sure that you're putting these things into practice. How are you going to change the life or trajectory of, a Black men and boys, and not necessarily change their life, right? But how are you going to impact them to make sure that we are reminding them about their health and wellness, their mental health, and all that good stuff. And so really, when we think about what this looks like, it does create an opportunity for greater conversations within our communities around what does resources look like, but also, how can we get more involved? We started getting to the part about policy, but, as we think about really creating change in our community, we have to become more engaged around policy and understand that policy leads to funding leads to more programming, and programming leads to more prevention, right? And so we live in a society where we fund more interventions than we do prevention, and we really have to engage in that policy process. So what questions do we have? Somebody said, "Can we meet like this on a regular basis?" We can certainly try. We certainly love having these conversations. And so one of the things I will challenge everybody to do is, create these conversations in your community. We have ourselves a group chat, and we're texting and talking pretty regularly around things that are going on. So you can create these conversations on a regular basis within your community. And I think that will spur lots of opportunities for different things to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something, I'm looking at, people are saying in the chat, and one person, they mentioned, I'm trying to scroll up real quick. And it was around hopefully, I think it's Kim, and she's like, hopefully Black churches, legacy organizations, and fraternities will step up. And so, and you guys know, the fundraising campaign that I'm going to launch. I'm not going to use this space to boast about it, but we're going to launch it. But the biggest aspect of what we're going to launch is that the goal is for it to be funded by the people, because unfortunately, and we just seen it with the Black Baptist Convention, right? They took the Target money, right? So, and everybody knows what we're doing around Target, right? And so I think when we think about even some of our legacy organizations, again, they are funding these large scale events from companies that most people that run it don't look like who the community that we're trying to serve. And so this goes back to the thing as a community to be like, we have to fund the stuff in our communities, and we have to fund when you see people doing stuff, how you can support, whether it's dropping off water, and the same thing for our Black girls as well, right? And we have to do it ourselves, because if we try to rely on like, oh, well, people want to do these things, and then you're trying to get the money to come from Fortune 100 companies and stuff, they'll dictate how you do the thing, right? They'll be like, oh, well, you can't have this speaker, but you can have this speaker, or I want you to focus on this, right? It has to be our money that is we're putting forth, so that the things, no matter how small, and the thing is that it's also not that it has to be big and it doesn't have to be monetized, right? If you can get 10 brothers together in your community, right, that's fire, right? If you can get 10 brothers over here, right, and if all of us get 10 brothers together, that's moving us forward, right? And so I think that that's really important as I just think about what we're talking about, and like we can't think about things being sponsored or getting money from big corporations and stuff like that, because they'll dictate what you can do, how you can do it, and where you can do it.
No, thank you. We have another question on the screen from Kim Howard, and it's, how do women, particularly Black women, create a safe space for Black men to show up authentically? I love working with men. I found that when they feel safe to be themselves, they will open up. We have a whole lot. We have this conversation actually a lot
all the
group.
time. Yeah.
I think. And so one of the things I will say is that, you know, we in our when we have these conversations, we often have more Black women in our groups than Black men, and that in itself, you know, just shows the love for that Black women have for Black men and boys in this conversation. I think the one thing that I would say is, you know, as you're creating these spaces, make sure that you are consistent in holding these spaces. And the one thing that I would say is, as you're creating these spaces, make sure that the stuff that men are sharing remains within the group, right? Don't let it leak out, or don't let it become a thing where they're going to be ridiculed, because that's going to damage the group and the credibility of that group. Anybody else want to add?
Yeah, definitely. I was going to add that, you know, sisters have been continuing to hold it down, always have. So, you know, they are the ones asking, hey, what can I do? They're attending even the Breaking the Ice conference we have here in New York, the Black Men's Conference. They are leading the charge with that. So definitely. And I say also, you know, even as you hold it, it kind of step back a little bit, kind of allow like the group process, allow it to function and kind of go, even though you guys started it, but allow it to kind of function and run on its own, because that's ultimately how a group should run. But you guys we appreciate the Black sisters, even being in this room today, and turnkeying this information to you know, the brothers in your life.
Let's see. Another question. I noticed, especially on social media, internalized oppression towards Black professionals, questioning their credentials, skills, and qualifications. It's important to highlight what we as professionals face in the field trying to do our jobs. Candy, you should have asked that question at the start of this conversation.
Right.
Man, my word. You had like the stories that we could tell. But you're absolutely correct, right? I think that, you know, some of this also goes into this idea that, you know, as Black professionals, we constantly have to validate and revalidate our credentials when we walk into rooms, right? And so, you know, one of the things that like our group allows for is just to be like, yo, today was hard. Like, yeah, I'm Dr. Anthony Street, but with our group, I'm Anthony, and we're having a regular conversation about today was difficult. And, you know, I think, again, this goes back to my questionable relationship with social media. Social media shows you all the good sides. They show you the success. They show you all the things, but what they don't show you is the years of struggle that we had to go through to get to this place, or the struggles that we're going through now, right? Yeah, we'll show up as our best self because that's what we're supposed to, but it does not show all of the behind the scenes work that it takes to get us here.
Yeah, I just to add to that, just if you think about our group chat, right? When we first were in there talking, I asked, was it okay to call you Anthony, right? Or do I call you Doctor, right? Because I wanted to honor your work, right? Honor your process. And I think we assume that we can call somebody something. We assume that they don't deserve that, but we're not as inquisitive as we need to be. And get the permission and the connection with that. Once you said, we in there like, bro, yo, bro. So
I still call him Doc, though. I still call him.
and I was about to say, as much as I say, just call me Anthony just call me Anthony, right? And yeah, so I get it, and I get it. It's a respect thing and all that. I think that, when we are in these spaces, I think that, and it really does matter. Like, I will say that, and you all have seen it, you all have experienced it. Like, depending on the room that we're in is how much we're going to hold on to that, right? And I think that is a beautiful thing, but also something that we shouldn't have to do. One of the questions I always get is, "Oh, how old are you?" And it wouldn't matter if that question was actually genuine, but they're really trying to say is, you're too young to have this position, or you're too young to have this degree, or whatever, right? And that becomes a different level of microaggression.
Right.
The question on the screen or statement is, I think it's important to mention Black LGBTQ plus men in this conversation. They often feel doubly invisible, sometimes marginalized within Black communities because of toxic masculinity or heteronormativity, and also face racism in white LGBTQ plus spaces. The mental health impact is real. Higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts, all made worse by stigma and the lack of safe spaces to exist in and or heal. You're absolutely correct. And I think one of the things that hopefully we're making clear is that when we have these conversations around Black men and boys, it is inclusive of all Black men and boys, right? At the same time, understanding that intersectionality is important, right. And really understanding that the same way that we are creating spaces here for Black men and boys, there also have to be spaces created for Black men that identify within the LGBT community, because the level of trauma or the healing is going to look a little bit different, but they're still part of the community of Black men and boys. And so, yes, they're part of these conversations. At the same time, we also need to create opportunities for those conversations that happen within that group, because there is a lot of internalized oppression and trauma that happens that we have to address. And again, I don't think this is a space where we want to create we're doing worse than one or the other. It's a space where we're talking about healing and how do we create these spaces. And so for us, this is the start of a space, but there's many ways to create a space. I do want to come back to a question because we're almost out of time, and I actually want all of you to answer. It's from Sean Dove, and it says, "Who's healing the healers? How are you brothers taking care of your own well-being and healing?"
Yeah, I saw that question from Brother Dove. I was like, how much time you got, brother, for that?
Yeah.
I believe in full transparency. Like, before here, I was in my stats class, and I told the teacher, "Yo, I'm done with this. I'm done with you." So, and she was like, no, and she was very supportive and very warm, So I was just coming off of like high emotions, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot. It's a lot. So I appreciate that, Brother Love even asking that question. But spiritual life is truly important. My wife, my children, my mom is very, always there. You know what I'm saying? And you brothers, like, I have definitely pods of relationships that I've created, and it's truly, people that you never even met is like, yo, rooting for you, which is wild. You know what I'm saying? And it's brothers. So it's amazing thing, but it's intentional about that. I'm mindful about the self-care and not just like bath bombs, but really just in terms of like managing my emotions, being mindful about that imposter that pops in from time to time, and just taking care of myself on a high level. Yes, Brother Dove. That is no joke, man. So this is a high needs area I'm in right now, where what I'm saying, I was like, I'm done with this, but I'm back. I met with her before we came on here, and I'm in a good space now.
I think in mine, one, I just want to put out there, I don't mind going past 8:00. I just want to put that out there. I just want to, that's one. Two, I think for me, one, you can pray and see a therapist at the same time. So I'm doing both. Like, I love the church that I go to and the spiritual nourishment, but I also, take time to seek professional support around that. So you can do both. I love going to live sporting events. I'm a proud season ticket holder to the Dallas Cowboys, and I'm really looking forward to football season and going to the games.
Why?
I'm not. So I'll see y'all in the Super Bowl.
That's a whole other conversation we got to have.
And then one other thing that I do, though, I always get ruffled. People will be in the chat talking trash now. But anyways, another thing that I always love to share in terms of a way that I handle my mental health self-care is when I, and you can start just now. I started it when I first graduated. I didn't even know what I was starting when I did, but when I first graduated, I created what's called the happy folder, right? And so in the happy folder, the first thing that I ever put in there was like, I graduated and I got asked to give like a speech. So I had to make a bio, but I never, I graduated from college, so I don't have no bio. So I made a bio, right? And so since that time in this folder is, every time I've updated my bio is in there. When I've gone to speak to kids and they send me letters is in there. Comments or people will send the Black Man Can like messages sometimes about what the content means to them. I've like screenshotted those and then printed them out, and they're all in this folder. And so on your journey, you're going to find yourself in the valley. It's just a part of life, and it's a part of the journey of everything, whether it's from fatherhood to family to professional. You're going to find yourself in the valley. And what I do is I go to that happy folder and I pull out those letters and I read that bio that looks completely different. That said Brandon Frame and now it says Dr. Frame. And it reminds me that where I'm at is exactly where I prayed to be 5 years ago, and that I'm doing well, and that God is always going to give me more than what I ask for when I pray. I just have to do the work and make sure I take care of myself. And so I just share that with everybody in terms of what I do, because the finding yourself in the valley is going to happen. It's not a possibility to kind of go through life and not get there, but the folder gets me back to the mountaintop.
Yeah, and I'll piggyback on what everybody else says. Like, I have a therapist. I have a strong faith and a relationship with God. I pray. I have a morning routine that I connect with, right? And I also have a self-care day. Like, Monday is my self-care day. Monday, everything is no. Don't ask me nothing. And I make sure I'm good, right? And then my friends hold me accountable to taking care of myself on Monday. If I try to come up with an idea, I might be excited about the idea. I might be connected to work. It's like, yo, chill out, it's Monday. We'll talk to you Tuesday. And there's a boundary I set, there's a boundary they honor, and there's a boundary that they hold me accountable to. And that's helpful. Also created a 31-day self-care calendar on my website where for Black men. And 31 days, you're finding something different that you may think may help you. You may not agree with all the different things, but it's an opportunity to investigate some old things you should do and some new things you can do. But it's self-exploration. And I think that's important. I think, Brandon, even when you talk about your folder, right, you're going and you're looking, you're reminding yourself of your success. You're reminding yourself of the accomplishment. Even probably looking at the time when you created that bio and it was a hard time, but you got over it, right? And so you can look back and say, this helped me get to this next point. I'm an Eagles fan, so we good right now. We Gucci, right? So, and we will be Gucci for a minute. So I love when I hear Cowboys fans saying they're Cowboys fans, because that brings me joy, because I know there's another. That's an easy win. And I know that they're suffering, and they've been suffering for years, and they get super high in the beginning of the season, and they get super low, and that brings me some joy. But no, that's it, right? And I just started playing video games too. I started playing video games again. I started playing Madden, and the Eagles are on Madden. They got Saquon, and it's an easy win against Cowboys fans. So it's just those little things that you can find joy with. But your friendships too. Like I think about Aaron and I, we have a group chat, and we talk about everything. So that's helpful as well.
Yeah, so I think the self-care journey is really a struggle. You got to find time. I think for me, and this is just as you're in these roles, you start paying more attention to yourself, and so I noticed that my anxiety has been getting a whole lot more. So I have just started therapy to address that, but at the same time, really finding an outlet for doing things. So I do Legos with my son. Legos have been the most relaxing thing I've ever done. And I know, every parent growing up has stepped on a Lego, and you probably cursed at the Legos. But now that my kids are old enough to actually engage with them, Legos, putting together Legos, and I'm not talking about like regular Lego sets. I'm talking about like multiple box sets that you got to really like focus on, right? And those, it's become so relaxing to me. And then I'm good to binge watch a good show. Like, you give me a good show, I will binge watch it in one sitting, because sometimes the rest and the self-care is just doing nothing. and that is okay.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to not have your agenda full, to not be productive, and to grant yourself that time to really reflect on how far you've come. So there was a version of me back in my 20s that is very different than where I am now, right? And so to Brandon's point, just really giving yourself grace and acknowledging where you are, because you're in a much different space, and also understand that this is not a sprint. It is a marathon, and so you'll get to where you need to be going, and just internalizing that process. Since everybody's talking about their team, I am a bona fide Atlanta Falcons fan, and yes, I know I don't want to hear anything about it, and the team stresses me out every year. And so, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. So that's how we all engage in self-care. But I think the biggest thing is giving yourself permission. I think that we've all been really indoctrinated into this hustle and bustle culture where you have to grind. And I think it's okay to slow down. I think it's okay to take time to think about where you want to be at. I think it's okay to rest. Rest is revolutionary. And so as we engage in these spaces, we also are taking care of ourselves in terms of our health and mental health.
Absolutely.
And so we're wrapping up. Here we go with our power minute. So in 1 minute or less, tell the folks what they can do right now to engage with Black men and boys in their community.
I'll just start. I'll say first, just want to create those spaces. Like I think about, again, we have currently a program going on in New York for boys who have graduated. We have our camps for boys, middle school, elementary school, middle school, and then the programs that happen during the school year. When you are intentional about creating spaces, and we do the dinners across the country for grown men, nonetheless, everything is about creating spaces for Black men to be able to come together, for Black boys to come together, for Black men to pour into Black boys. So please continue to be intentional about that in your community, and pull them in so that you can give them the knowledge, the information that they need. I can't stress enough how impactful it is when we get the kings together and allow them to build. It allows for one way I like to say it is, men are thermostats and women are thermometers, right? And it comes to the point of where we set the temperature. Right. And when we create the spaces, it allows for men to be able to set the temperature in their communities, in their homes, and everybody starts to live and breathe off of that. Right. And so when we are building strong men and allowing for the thermostat to be set at a high temperature, it allows for our communities to thrive.
Yeah. And I'll say this because we can't all be creators, right? But we can all be supporters. So if you see something or you see a program that's already in existence, ask, can you volunteer? Ask, can you financially support? Because we definitely need finances, right? And what that looks like. Connect your community to something that's already created. I think that's also another important way to support Black boys and give them the opportunity to choose us as well.
Aaron?
Yeah, I just being mindful about what you say and make sure that it aligns with what you're trying to do. So, for example, if you're on this call, you generally care about Black men's mental health, so and black boys' mental health. So, just being mindful about when you're around Black men and boys, the language that you're using, right? So, and just like creating that safety, I think is also important. So, it's also to show it and demonstrate it. So, if you saying something, wow, like, bet I can't say nothing to you, and that means that's for everybody. So it's like if your homie is sharing something with you, if you have to check yourself and kind of ensure, like, why am I feeling comfortable with him sharing this with me, right? And if I turn him away, how's that going to make him feel? So just being mindful about your own stuff when someone is sharing and having an experience, being mindful about that, because that be an opportunity where you can say, yo, tell me a little bit more about that, or how can I support you with what you just shared. So I think just learning that language, because it starts on a micro level, right? We're doing this big work around Black men's mental health, but it starts in our own community. And, I talked about that no homo thing. I have a lot of friends that used to say that. And I'm like, yo, don't come to me with that. I'm 40 plus years old. Don't come to me with that. Right. So just even that, shifting that piece, like, you ain't got to tell me that. It's explicit. I understand what you said. Right. I understand whatever you're not that. So you don't have to make it clear by saying no homo. So I erase that narrative out with my friends that I have conversations with. So that's small things that you could do, right, in terms of shifting and changing that narrative.
one last thing. I need for adults. This because this is killing me. It's killing me. It's killing me. I need adults to not refer to our black boys as YNs. They don't even call themselves YN.
Right.
Adults made that term and started calling boys because they wear maybe because the mat and you call them YNs. That means you have now dehumanized that black boy and black boys. I need, if you hear a person, you hear an adult refer to boys as YNs.
Yeah.
And it's adults saying this. Boys do not call themselves YNs. These are adults saying these boys are YNs. So I need, when you hear it, you need to say, do not let that go, right? Because you do not need to see our boys as YNs, because then you have dehumanized them, and then everything that happens from everything that we talked about today.
Absolutely. And so I think the one thing that I just want to affirm, as everybody is the one thing to take away is tell your truth. Like, black men and boys need to hear all types of stories, successful stories, stories of challenges, stories of risk, stories of abundance. So tell your truth. I think the other part of it too is, recognize that we all have a responsibility to take care of our community, not just, the immediate household, but how are you showing up in a way that is modeling good behavior, that is really connecting with young men and boys in your community and giving them opportunities to see something different. And the last thing I think that I really want to talk about is really around just continue this commitment. I think as we are showing up for events like this, it means that we care. Like, just keep that commitment and really carry that commitment forward. I think one of the things that Michelle Obama said during the DNC is, like, we got to do something, right? And so if you can, do something. But to Bashay's point, everybody can't create the next organization, but you can support. And so support your community, support your black men and boys, and let's continue to build. I want to say thank you to Aaron, Bashay, Brandon. You all have been amazing. You show up every time I call, and I appreciate you, brothers, for that. This is an important conversation. We're going to continue it. But I really just want to, just show my appreciation in real time, because I know that this is a labor of love, and you show up because you want to. But at the same time, it is meaningful to me that you all show up to share your talents and to share your expertise on this topic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. The last thing that I want to do is make sure that, as we're talking about healing black men and boys, we heal by listening, we heal by loving, and we heal by creating spaces like this. So please go out there and create spaces, and we'll see you all on the next iteration, everybody.
Peace out.